All right. Well, welcome everybody to the 2021 Refresh Fest. We're going to do a quick review of all of the annual topics that our state oversight agencies require us to go over annually. For most of you, this should just be a quick refresher of what we've gone over in orientation, or if you've been here for a while, you probably have heard this spiel once or twice. So we're going to start off with abuse prevention and mandated reporting. So in order to know what to report for abuse, it's always a good refresher reminder to go over what is considered abuse and neglect. So first we have physical abuse, right? We know that we can't hit, kick, punch, push, shove any of the individuals under any circumstances. Corporal punishment is not allowed in any of our programs. It's not part of any of our behavior management systems. And they also include injuries that can't be explained and suspicious due to the extent or location, the number of injuries at one time, or the frequency over time. So I think of things like handprints that are in the shape, or bruises in the shape of a handprint. You know, it's kind of a no-brainer where something like that would come from, so it might need to be looked into. Or sometimes clusters of bruises at different healing rates might be suspicious, so we maybe just want to look in to see what's going on. Psychological abuse tends to be a little bit of a catch-all category. A lot of people think of verbal abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse, but they all essentially mean the same thing. They all mean anytime a caregiver, a staff member does something, says something to an individual that makes them feel uncomfortable, makes them feel threatened in some kind of shape or form. So you want to be careful about the things that you say, the gestures that you make, because some gestures can come off threatening, so just being cautious about that. Sexual abuse would be any kind of sexual contact with an individual that receives services. And this is regardless of what program this person receives services through, what their age is, their consenting ability. Hi, Marilyn. If there's sexual contact in any sort of way, that would be considered sexual abuse. So this includes things like touching, showing things, showing pictures, exchanging pictures, texts, emails, any sort of exchange in that way would be considered sexual abuse. All right, got a couple more people coming in. Good. All right, then we have neglect. Neglect is making sure that we are providing the services that we are expected to provide to the individuals, right? So in our residential programs, we're expected to provide things like food, clothing, shelter, access to healthcare, access to education. So if we're kind of dropping the ball in any of those areas, that would be considered neglect. Neglect also takes into account all of those plans that we have in place for our individuals, particularly when it comes to safety sort of things. Things like levels of supervision, anything that they might need as a form of support. You know, if they need help in the shower, if they need help eating, the way that we prepare their food, all those sort of things would fall under neglect if we're not following those plans. Deliberate misuse of restraint or seclusion, right? So we don't use seclusion in any of our programs whatsoever, right? So if you or a staff member are locking somebody in a room and walking away, that's a problem. That's seclusion. It's abuse. It needs to be stopped. It needs to be reported. Restraint we do use. However, we spend a lot of time going over kind of the reasons and justifications for doing a restraint. So we always want to kind of keep that in the back of our mind anytime we think about putting hands on somebody, right? So in our OPWDD programs, their definition is to interrupt a truly dangerous situation. OCFS, they talk about anytime anyone is at imminent risk of harm. And they include the individual themselves. It could be other individuals in the program. It could be staff members, could be community members. If somebody is at imminent risk of harm, we are justified in doing a restraint. Controlled substances. Some of our individuals are prescribed controlled substances. Some of our staff are prescribed controlled substances. As long as we're using them and providing them along the lines of that prescription, everything's fine. You do anything outside of that, it's abuse, right? So if you're giving them way too many pills, if you yourself are popping things that you're not prescribed, could be a problem, could be abuse.
Robin?
Yes?
Got a question. So just to make sure that I'm clear, seclusion doesn't mean the door has to be locked. It just
means that they can't be they can't get out. Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Yep. So we're not allowed to do that in any of our programs. Can't prevent somebody from leaving at their room. Adversive conditioning, right? Adversive conditioning is kind of an old school way of thinking about behavior management. It's causing some sort of unpleasant stimulus, uncomfortable, uncomfortableness to try to modify behavior. So the idea is, things like old school ways of people trying to stop biting their nails, right? They would put hot sauce or things that just didn't taste very good on their nails because the thought process is, doesn't taste good, not going to put my fingers near my mouth, not going to bite my nails. Those sort of things, there's logic behind them. However, they're not therapeutic, and they often are not very successful at modifying behaviors, changing behaviors. So they are not used in any of our programs. And if we are using them, it's considered abuse, needs to be stopped, needs to be reported. And lastly, obstruction, right? So this is interfering with or just frankly getting in the way of an incident and investigation in any shape or form. So it could be hiding or destroying evidence, giving a false statement, threatening a team member over their knowledge or reporting abilities. So anytime you would get in the way of an investigation, they would treat that just as seriously as abuse and neglect. The Justice Center also requires us to report significant incidents, right? So significant incidents are these scenarios that after they happen, you kind of sit back and you're like, oh my gosh, there was a pretty big potential for that to go wrong. Or it maybe just was a minor situation, but there still was that potential for it to just be a big problem. And so these need to be looked into because we want to try to prevent these situations from happening in the future, because the next time it happens, we might not be so lucky and it will be a big problem. So I think of things like med errors, right? When we're passing too many meds or not giving meds on time, things like doing a restraint when you're not trained, or two individuals getting into a fight. All of these scenarios, there's a potential for it to be a really big problem. Different state oversight agencies also have different requirements about what they want to be reported. So we strongly encourage you, if something happens and you're just kind of on the fence, you're not sure, reach out to a supervisor. You guys in QA, hopefully I'm okay in telling people that they could reach out to you if they're kind of on the fence, if they're unsure, that you guys would be a good resource. Because at the end of the day, it's better to check than to just kind of say, I don't think I need to report it. Just check with somebody. The worst thing they could say is, no, you don't need to report it. And you know that you did your due diligence to see if it was necessary or not. So who here is a mandated reporter? Yeah, right, good. I'm glad to see
We
that.
all are.
Yeah, that's right. We all are. If you have any sort of connection to Vanderheyden in any shape or form, it doesn't matter what department you work in, if you're an intern, if you're an employee, we're all mandated reporters, which means that if we see something or we have knowledge of something, we are obligated to make a report. No ifs, ands, or buts. There are some protections, however, to make sure that people feel safe in making those reports, right? So the first, you're going to be granted immunity from any sort of legal claims if you make a report in good faith, right? So if you are just genuinely, you have information, you make a report, you're going to be protected. Nobody can come after you legally. However, if you're just kind of stirring the pot, maybe you don't like your coworker, and so you call up the Justice Center and you make a false statement, right? Then they can come after you. You're not going to be protected in that scenario. The law also protects you from any kind of retaliation among the agency, right? So the agency can't come after you. They can't change your hours, demote you, change your position, anything like that. Again, as long as that report was made in good faith. The law is going to protect against the disclosure of the reporter's identity, although there might be some scenarios where your identity would be disclosed. But at the end of the day, when you call and you make a report, they are going to ask for your information. But when they call up QA, they don't disclose who made the report, right? They don't ever say, Robin Doptis just gave us all this information. They just say, hey, we have this new case. We got to get the ball rolling. Failure to report, there could be some hefty consequences, right? Because you are mandated reporters. Those consequences include administrative discipline, termination, possible civil liability, or criminal prosecution, right? So at the end of the day, if you have information, you see something, you are obligated to stop it and report it. Jonathan's Law is also included in this presentation, right? We hopefully all know who Jonathan Carey is and his tragic story. But his family has worked very hard to try to make sure that communication has improved with families, with caregivers. So Jonathan's Law was created, and it's all about making sure that parents and guardians are notified of any sort of incident within 24 hours, right? So that's one of the reasons why we want to quickly notify the AOD. They get the ball rolling with those notifications to make sure that that communication is open with the family. The family also has the ability to request in writing access to the investigation, right? So we want to make sure that we are open and honest with families about what is happening with their children, their loved ones. So you come across something that is considered abuse, or you have knowledge of something that is abuse, your first obligation is to ensure health and safety of that individual. Often it's separating them from whichever staff member or scenario is considered abuse. You're going to seek medical attention. In most scenarios, it's just going to be, getting them in touch with the nurse so that they can be evaluated. In extreme scenarios where maybe they're extremely injured, maybe taking them to the hospital. You're just going to kind of use your judgment. Tell your supervisor and the administrator on duty immediately, right? Like I said, they're the ones that are going to get the ball rolling of getting those safety plans in place, of, notifying the family and doing anything else that we might need to do administratively. You're going to ensure that the allegation remains confidential. So even though, you have this information, we don't want you sharing it with everybody, right? We don't want you talking to your coworkers or the other individuals about it, because what happens is it kind of turns into the telephone game where the message and the story changes, it becomes exaggerated, or it changes over time. And in order to do a successful investigation, we need things to be as clear and concise as possible. Also, you don't want to be asking the individual a lot of questions unless you're directed to do so, because again, you could confuse them, you could unintentionally put words in their mouth, and we just want to avoid that from happening. So to report abuse and neglect, for anything that happens within Vanderheyden, you want to report to the Justice Center. So this would be anything that falls under our programs. Anything outside of that involves children under the age of 18, you're going to be notifying the State Central Registry, right? So we have some people who in our like CFTSS programs or ComHab, where they're working with families out in the community, if something happens within those families or within their home school district, we would be notifying the State Central Registry. Regardless of where it happened and where you have to report it, you are obligated to make sure that someone makes a report, right? It is not acceptable to be in one of those scenarios where you are just assuming that somebody else made a report, right? Like, for example, if something happens in front of Jerry and myself, I can't assume that Jerry's making the report, and he can't assume that I'm making the report, and nobody makes a report, right? We need to just cross our T's, dot our I's, and make sure that that report is made. But the easiest thing to do is prevent abuse from happening altogether, right? And then we don't have to worry about any of this. So the way that we do that, right, or we recognize that abuse can be detrimental, right? We are a trauma-informed agency, so we know that the effects of abuse can be really horrific. And we want the individuals, when they're in our programs, to feel safe, to feel comfortable. So we want to prevent that abuse altogether. So how we do that, number one, we got to recognize that we are people. We have our own emotions, our own triggers, and at the end of the day, this can be a very stressful job to be in. But you want to use your resources when you start to get to a place where you are feeling less tolerant, right? So you're using your safety plan, you're relying on your team members, right? Hopefully you work amongst a team where you have each other's backs, right? If someone's having a rough day, you're helping them out. And then when you're having a rough day, they're helping you out. And in some scenarios, if you're able to, and supervision's not a problem, you could take a break, right? Regroup, step outside, breathe some fresh air, get yourself in a better mind frame. If you are feeling less tolerant over a long period of time, right, you want to talk to your supervisor. You want to talk to somebody about it so that you can strategize some options. Burnout is a real thing, a real problem, and we want to make sure that we are supporting you in having positive interactions with the individuals. The other thing that you can do is you can strive to have a positive relationship with the individuals that you support. When you start to have a good relationship with the folks that we support, you're going to see them through a different lens. You're going to look at your job and your obligations in a different light, right? So understanding that these individuals have basic human needs, and oftentimes their behaviors are ways to communicate those needs. We want to make sure that we have reasonable expectations for the individuals. We don't want to be setting ourselves up to have these super high expectations that the individuals can't meet, because then we get frustrated, we get disappointed, and those feelings can lead to us being less tolerant. We want to ensure that the individuals are not negatively labeled. We're going to give praise and supportive feedback rather than criticizing them, and just being aware of stress factors for each individual, how to anticipate them, and if possible, alleviate some tensions. All right, so that's abuse prevention and mandated reporting. Jerry, you just perked up. Did you want to do fire safety? You're muted, by the way.
Yeah, I was thinking I'd give you a little bit of a break and we'll kind of bounce back and forth. All right, folks. So fire and safety, just so you are aware, this is not, this is going to be an overview because each work site and work location is going to require a different level of understanding on how to respond to a fire. So this is some general stuff that everybody can apply. But obviously the first thing you'd want to know is the evacuation plan for the house that you're in and what is your role in that situation. You're going to want to know the layout of the building. Some buildings are more complex than others. We want to know the location of every individual and what their capability and needs are. And obviously we want to know what all the exits are, what type of alarms are in the building. And really important, once you're outside, you want a meeting place that everybody can rejoin the group. And you want to know how many people are in there, so you're counting heads once you actually get to the outside. All right, so one of the big considerations is really kind of understanding what the capabilities, the self-preservation abilities of each individual in those different locations are. Folks with limited mobility or somebody that was just newly disabled, like for instance, if they just had a recent break, broken leg, any characteristics about those residents or limited means of egress. We want to take those into consideration. So if a fire were to occur, the first thing we want to be thinking about are the individuals that are going to have the most difficult time getting out in the event of a fire. We're going to start with those individuals and then move our way towards the ones that have the mobility and ability to get out either on their own or rather quickly. We like to do acronyms. So here's one for you, RACE. We don't want you racing around in the middle of a fire. We want you to have a calm, cool, collected head. But here's one just to kind of give you a quick thinking strategy. The first thing you want to do is remove all persons in immediate danger to safety, right? What we talked about was getting the folks out that need the help the most first. Then we want to go ahead and hit that alarm, activate it, call 911, and then closing the doors to prevent the spread of the fire. That's going to help preserve things and give everybody a little bit more time. And then ultimately you want to evacuate. So again, exit the building quickly using your assigned exits from the emergency evacuation map. You should check. Everybody should be aware of where those evacuation maps are. I know it is part of your onboarding in your individual locations is to be made aware of those, but you should also just kind of always make sure you're brushing up on that kind of thing. If the area is blocked, use the nearest and safest alternative exit. Always want to remain calm. There's nothing worse than everybody running around bumping into walls because they've lost their heads, right? Team members should make sure that all individuals have left the building prior to exiting themselves. And fire drills, we talk about making sure that they're as realistic as possible. Sometimes we get into the routine of just doing what is the easiest, and it might be doing it the same way, but often a fire could block a particular egress that you're using as part of your drill. So you're going to need to know how to get out through the other points, the other exit points. So make sure you practice those different ways and in different conditions at different times of day, things of that nature. And we talk about sanctuary. Robin mentioned it earlier. Again, parallel process. Individuals are only going to take the fire drills as seriously as we are. So if we don't take them serious in the moment, then they won't. And there's a good chance when there's a very real fire situation that they will not take it seriously then. So considerations for evacuation, again, talked about the self-preservation capability of each individual, right? Do they have the means and the wherewithal to understand the gravity of the situation and to be able to get out to preserve their self? If not, we're going to want to step in, intervene, and try to help those individuals first and foremost. What will it take to keep each individual at the assembly point and reasonably calm? All right, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And what will it take to maintain each individually at the assembly point over a period of time? Or where will they go if re-entry is not possible? Right, so we have to take in mind the individuals that we serve, and often they might have limited ability to sit around outside of a building for long periods of time. So what's the backup plan? Where are we going to go if we can't get back into the building? I use as an example one of the fire drills that took place in the school. Everybody was outside, the entire population, and due to various circumstances, people were not able to re-enter the building as quickly. And a lot of the young folks started to get agitated. People started to wander away. So we want to be prepared for those situations and be thinking about the individuals and their ability to remain calm and do as needed to be in a particular crisis situation. And if not, we want to have some ability to kind of manage that situation so it doesn't get out of control. Right, another acronym, just a quick little muscle memory, fire extinguishers. You pick them up, you grab them. What are you going to do? You're going to pull the pin, you're going to aim the nozzle at the base of the fire, you're going to squeeze that trigger, and you're going to sweep from side to side. One of the things that we want to make sure people understand, though, is we don't want to try to deal with a fire that is already out of control and beyond the means and ability for that little fire extinguisher to put it out. We don't want to put yourself at risk trying to do that. And you also want to be mindful of things like, is this toxic smoke that you're breathing in as you're attempting putting out this fire? Your safety and the safety of the individuals is paramount. So make sure you take care of that. And it's only you can make an assessment whether or not it's worth the time. Do you think you can manage this fire and put it out quickly with a fire extinguisher? If not, we want to go ahead and call 911 and get ourselves and everybody out of there. Okay. So I think, yep, I got that. So just so you're aware, not everybody is going to have access to an AED, but on our campus, we do have 3. One is just in the school, just outside of the gym. The old school, there's one in the main foyer outside the AOD office, and there's one in the health services office. And just so you're all aware, all CPR trainings now include AED training. If you're on this Zoom, you're already trained in CPR first aid. It's good for 2 years. And that includes your AED. So you want to make sure, well, we'll make sure that you stay compliant with that. Bloodborne pathogens. It's a little quiz time, so feel free to unmute at will. And we will be handing out virtual high fives for people that can answer the questions the fastest. So
LaShawn, no pressure, but Huntley kicked butt on these when they did it.
All right. So Hep B and hepatitis C attack which organ?
Liver.
Excellent, Brian. High five.
High
High
five.
five. That's our virtual high five. AIDS is caused by which virus?
HIV.
Yeah.
Good job, Lisa.
Okay.
High five. All right. Which skin test can detect tuberculosis?
PPD.
Yeah.
Thank you. Get a nice, well-rounded response from
Score for Huntley.
Number 4 is a little bit of a trick question. How often do you need a PPD test?
Once a year.
Correct. If you're in the OPWDD program, it's a 2-step program. And once upon a time with the OCFS, it was annually. So that's the answer you're going to see. But for OCFS, it's no more. You do not need one. It's just in the OPWDD world, and it's a 2-step process. So everybody gets 100 points. Universal precautions means treating bodily fluids as if they are known to be infectious. True or false?
True.
True. I didn't get to play
Story.
music because you were so fast buzzing in. Excellent. On with the quiz. Currently, there is no vaccination available for Hep B. True or false?
Oh,
Correct. There is a vaccination. Nice job. Who was that waited? Was that you, Lisa? No? All right, Lisa. Good job. Which PPE can be found in a spill kit? What?
Cat litter.
Hamburger?
Cat litter.
Cat litter.
It's a PPE, so it got to be something that we wear.
Mhm.
Yes.
Is it gloves?
Yeah.
If you have cat litter in your spill kit, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to the nurses. Um, I'm
That's
not sure
helpful in the wintertime, though.
I'm
Cat
not
litter is
sure
very
what to keep
helpful.
in your spill kit at that point. All right. Hand washing is an important part of a disease prevention. We have been informed that if you get this wrong, that we will immediately terminate you.
Mhm.
We know that's true.
We know that's true. In the middle of this pandemic, if you do not know washing your
True
hands
story.
prevents disease prevention, then there's no more help that we can provide for you. Blood is the only bodily fluid that can carry pathogens.
False.
Correct. That is false. Nice job. An incident report should only be completed if you do not know whose blood you were exposed to.
False.
Correct. We got to go ahead and write. We see blood, we want to be writing something up, right?
Any bodily fluid. Oof.
Yep. And now we're all going to need for you to find a hand washing station and take your camera with you and demonstrate washing your hands and sing happy birthday twice.
Mm-hmm.
If you're driving in the car, though, I don't want you to take a risk of washing your hands. You can just
Oh, I saw that, Brian. I saw
There you go.
it.
Brian was doing some demonstration. Nice
Go
job.
between the fingers, get the thumbs. Oh, yeah. We got sanitizer.
All right. So that's a little hand washing.
Oh, yeah. That's my favorite. I love it.
Oh, we actually had somebody. Nice job, LaShawn.
All right, guys.
Your side, LaShawn.
You guys are the best.
Okay.
Can we skip them next year because they did so good this year?
We'll just replay this. All right, Vanna.
I'm trying. I clicked it like 3 times.
All right, a little corporate compliance. Oh boy, we're about to be judged, right? So we have corporate compliance in the house and HIPAA and confidentiality folks. So I'd love to turn the mic over to them, but I won't. But they'll get to grade us at the end to see how well we did. So what is corporate compliance? It is a means of having internal policies and procedures designed to prevent and detect violations of applicable law, regulations, rules, and ethical standards by employees, agents, and others. It involves legal risk management, internal controls. Boy, those QA people sound like they've got a very tough job. We have a bunch of oversight agencies. We've got the OCFS, the OPWDD, we got SED, we got the USDA, and sometimes we even got OPP. So everybody all right. Thank you, Marilyn, for a little comedic relief. So again, our compliance plan is a set of procedures designed to ensure that Vanderheyden complies with laws and regs governing its activities. It also serves as a mechanism to detect and prevent improper behavior in the workplace. All right. So really, they're looking at preventing, right? Because not every corporate compliance violation was done intentionally. Like I said, we have a bunch of oversight agencies with a lot of regulations, and it's easy for us to maybe be in violation of something because there's just so much to keep up with. So corporate compliance is going to make sure that we're staying on top of those things, whether it be accidental or sometimes it's intentional. We want to make sure that we're able to detect that if a violation occurs. And obviously, we want to correct it so we don't have any further non-compliance in the future. And that's a tall order. There's a lot of things that go along with that. But we want you to know that you should feel safe and comfortable if you do see something that you believe is a violation, that you can go ahead and blow that whistle. And whistleblowing just means that you're calling attention to something that shouldn't be happening, and you're going to let QA go ahead and investigate that to see if it was one, intentional or maybe unintentional. But either way, we want to figure out a way to stop it from happening and take some corrective measures. But you should know that you are protected from any type of retaliation from the agency itself for go ahead and bringing that to everyone's attention. Just make sure you're making those in good faith. We want to make sure that we say that because sometimes people might want to use that avenue as a means to maybe get somebody in trouble because they're upset about something, right? So you're immune from retaliatory measures, but that's if you make it in good faith. Lastly, where would you report it to? We have a nice anonymous, no caller ID attached extension to our main number. It's 266. And you should all know who our corporate compliance folks are. And the director of quality assurance is Jenny Weger. And on the line, we also have Brian, Ed, and Lisa Villeneuve, all part of that corporate compliance team, going to provide me with a very in-depth analysis of my coverage of this part of the Refresh Fest, I'm sure. All right, I want to take a moment to marinate in this long-standing joke we have about HIPAA. I cannot explain this joke to you if you do not get it for obvious reasons, or not so obvious if you don't get the joke.
Doesn't get old. It doesn't
Never
get
gets
old.
All right, so the hopefully you get the gist of that joke is that HIPAA is one of those things we just really can't talk about people's personal business, right? Everybody has a right to confidentiality and privacy, and when we're talking about people's medical information and all of that, right? We work in an agency that often there's a ton of confidential information out there, and we want to make sure that we're doing our very best to protect that, you know. And I always tell people, think about your deepest, darkest secret and think about whether or not you would want somebody else knowing about that. And so to protect other people's information as if it was your own, okay? Each individual has that right to privacy and the right to confidentiality, and all agency business should be treated as if it was confidential. All individual records should be locked and secured in locked cabinets. Access to individual records is limited to staff who are authorized to view them. And we really like to emphasize for folks that, you know, many people are granted the ability to be able to look at various records, but you really don't need to look at somebody else's records, even though you might possess the ability to do so, if it doesn't pertain to the treatment of an individual that you are directly involved in, right? So just not to be curious and want to look in, right? So just make sure you're sticking with what you need to know. And, you know, the more we limit access to people's records, the better off we all are. So here are those tips. Do not discuss confidential information with others who are not involved, or like I said, in the individual's care. Do not access individual information unless you have a right to know. And confidential information that is no longer needed should be disposed of properly. There are confidential shredding bins all throughout the agency. If there's not one at your location, talk to your supervisor about how do you get it to a confidential shredding bin. And here's just some good tips, right? Sometimes we get talking and discussing things, but we want to be very aware of who is around when you're briefing other staff about something that might pertain to one of the individuals we serve. Always be cautious about email. Often, you know, there used to be another Jerry here, and I would often get emails that were directed towards him. And so we have to be very careful when we're sending stuff, and we know it contains some sensitive information, that we're really double checking who is on that email. Be alert with individual records and documentation. Don't leave it unattended or in areas that are easily accessible. If you're like me, I don't walk around with folders or anything of that nature if it has confidential information, because I don't trust myself that I don't sit down and talk with somebody and might leave it accidentally on their desk, right? Vehicle driving, it's another test taking time for us to stop talking and a time for you to start unmuting and getting things right. And Maryland, I don't know what you do with your camera while you're driving, but thank you for the panoramic view of the inside of your vehicle at all times. It's very nice. So true or false, is there smoking permitted in the agency?
I've got a question. I did this, I printed everything out and I did the class with Valerie, but I didn't know this was the only last day to do it. But I already did,
If you
went
already
over
did it with Val, then you're all set.
and I'm the only one working today here, like trying to help people. So I'm like, I'm listening.
Marilyn, if you already did it, you don't need to. You can.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
You don't have to do it with us. If you did it with Val, you're good.
That's what I thought, but I didn't get the okay from anybody. So I just wanted to double check because I'm like, I'm trying to multitask.
We'd rather have you focus on the individual.
Yeah, I'm the only one here. So I'm kind of like, I think nobody told me.
You're okay.
So hop
right.
off then. You're all set if you did it with her.
Bye-bye.
You're good.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
All right. So did we answer the question whether or not there's smoking permitted in the agency vehicles?
True.
True, there is. True, right, correct. There is no smoking. Sorry, I got myself confused.
She got it right.
You got it right. If you are driving your own vehicle, however, though, for work purposes, can you smoke with individuals as long as they are in the back seat? No. But is it okay if they're on top of the vehicle smoking and you are in the car with the windows rolled up? All right, that was a trick question. Employees are responsible for reporting any and all accidents to the police before leaving the scene. Absolutely. Do not, if it doesn't matter how small it is, you get out of the vehicle and you don't think that there's any damage or whatever, make sure you call the police. It's not just about the vehicles, but the individuals that are inside. They may turn around later on and say that their neck hurts or whatever. So cover yourself, cover the individuals, make sure you're exchanging information and have the police there to document all of that. Employees do not have to report any traffic violations if they happened outside of work.
False.
Correct. You have to, and they're going to find out either way, so you might as well go ahead and let them know. And lastly, when leaving an agency vehicle, you need to ensure that all individuals served have left the vehicle, closed all the windows, and locked all the doors. True or false? True, correct.
Lori.
And I lied. It's not the last one. There are more questions. Do not worry about inspecting the vehicle prior to driving. That is the job of the QA staff.
False.
False. Correct. False. You will not be checking, nor will maintenance be checking the vehicles. It is your responsibility to ensure the vehicle you're getting in is safe. All employees who operate an agency vehicle should ensure that the gas level does not go below half a tank. Correct.
True.
True. We want to make sure that we're looking out. So nothing worse than getting in a vehicle and finding out you got 3 miles to hit the next gas station. Vanderheyden will pay for a parking ticket that you incur while driving an agency vehicle because it is experiencing a large surplus of cash.
False.
False.
Did you get a call?
If the agency vehicles are grounded, you can still use your own vehicle to transport the individuals or take an alpaca.
False.
False.
Take an alpaca.
No, why not? They're pretty rugged. Individuals served are not to be given any keys to any of the vehicles.
That's true.
That is absolutely true. We do not want to do that. All right. This comes to the point in our training where we're going to cover some sexual harassment prevention training. I just want to let you know in advance, though, even though it's titled sexual harassment, it is also applicable to any type of harassment in the workplace. 90% of this training is really going to be focused on helping you better understand what is considered sexual harassment. A small percentage will be dedicated to how you report sexual harassment. And then lastly, if you don't feel like perhaps it was handled to your satisfaction, there are some external reporting options. It's a rather lengthy PowerPoint. However, it is New York State's and we haven't changed it because we want to make sure this is such a serious topic. And if you've been paying attention out there in the world, or there's been plenty of instances where harassment or sexual harassment is live and well, and sometimes in places you wouldn't expect it, but it's out there everywhere. So what is harassment? It's discrimination that consists of words, signs, jokes, pranks, intimidation, physical actions, or violence directed at an employee due to any protected characteristic. Protected characteristics are like age, race, creed, national origin, things of that nature. I will go through the full list of protected characteristics later on. And I also want, because we often get the question, well, what if an individual says something sexually inappropriate to me? This training is about staff. This is not about the individual served. We have other means to kind of handle and deal and educate if we have that type of things happening with the individuals that we serve. So our agency takes a zero tolerance policy, and that means that any and all harassing behavior would be investigated, and disciplinary measures up all the way to termination would be exercised. Repeated behaviors, obviously, we're going to deal with that accordingly. So our sexual harassment overview, what does sex discrimination include? Any type of bias on the basis of sex, sexual harassment, sex stereotyping, discrimination on the basis of gender identity or the status of being transgender, and discrimination on the basis of pregnancy. All right, so what is sexual harassment? Again, it's unwanted verbal or physical advance, sexually explicit or derogatory statements, or sexually discriminatory remarks that is offensive or objectionable to the recipient or which interferes with his or her job performance. Some types are hostile environment or quid pro quo. Broken down a little bit more of hostile environment is sexual or discriminatory displays or publications anywhere in the workplace, right? So if you're to walk into somebody's office and they have the latest calendar with scantily clad individuals, then that would be considered a hostile environment because you're exposing other people to things that are objectionable. Hostile actions taken against an individual because of that individual's sex would also be a hostile environment. Quid pro quo, that's that Latin term of this for that, meaning that a person in power over someone else, a supervisor to a supervisee, requesting that they grant them some sort of sexual favor in exchange for a promotion, a better office, a new chair, time off, things of that nature. All of that would be considered like a quid pro quo situation of sexual harassment. Who can be the target? Anybody can be the target of sexual harassment, right? Not just employees of Vanderheyden. We have unpaid interns that come through our door, other non-employees. We have vendors that come in, bring us water, so on and so forth. They can be targeted. And so anybody can. And who can perpetrate sexual harassment or harassment? Anybody can, right? So we want to be aware of that. And if it is your supervisor, that is the perpetrator, then you want to go to their supervisor and so on and so forth. Where can it occur? Anywhere in the workplace, right? And where people tend to let down their guard is sometimes at employee-sponsored events, conferences, office parties, where there might be alcohol, or there might be dancing, or there might be something that feels a lot less like we're at work. If it's sponsored by the agency, you are held to the same standard of the sexual harassment policy that I'm speaking of now. Sex stereotyping, that is when we're harassing a person because that person does not conform to gender stereotypes, is sexual harassment, right? And by all means, this is meant to be interactive. So if you have any questions about any of the content at any time, feel free to unmute and ask your questions. We'll again ask at the end if there are any questions. Now, I want you to be aware that we talked about sexual harassment, right? But some things actually may rise to the level where it is unlawful to do something and might involve police involvement due to the nature of what it is. But I want to be very clear that people are understanding. So this kind of talks about all the acts that may be unlawful sexual harassment. It's quite a bit, so I'm going to talk a little bit faster than I normally do. I'm currently at a record of 35 seconds to get all of this done. And for the record, Robin, I'm being recorded, so we'll see what happens. Okay. Physical assaults of sexual nature, such as rape, sexual battery, molestation, or attempts to commit these assaults, intentional or unintentional physical conduct, which is sexual in nature, such as touching, pinching, patting, grabbing, brushing against another employee's body, or poking another employee's body, unwanted sexual advances, propositions, or other sexual comments, such as requests for sexual favors, accompanied by implied or overt threats concerning the victim's job performance, evaluation, or promotion, or other job benefits or detriments, subtle or obvious pressures for unwelcome sexual activity, sexually oriented gestures, noises, remarks, jokes, or comments about a person's sexuality or sexual experience where they are sufficiently severe or pervasive to create a hostile work environment, sexual or discriminatory displays or publications anywhere in the workplace, such as displaying pictures, posters, calendars, graffiti objects, promotional material, reading materials, or other materials that are sexually demeaning or pornographic. For the record. Hopefully I got the record on that one. I felt like I did. It felt good. Thanks, Brian. All right. So much of that was covered if you didn't get it, but much of that was covered throughout that. I just wanted to reinforce it. Retaliation. What is retaliation? It's something that we're not going to do if you make a complaint, right? And when you make a complaint, we refer to that as entering into a protected activity, right? So if you make a complaint about harassment or suspected harassment, you have entered protective activity. If you're providing information during an investigation or testifying in connection with the complaint, we refer to that as you have entered in protected activity. okay? And that means you're protected from being retaliated against by the agency, okay? Now, what it does not mean is that, let's say, for instance, Brian, you have been in supervision for the last 6 months, and it's been well documented that your job performance has been a little lackluster. You've been late quite a bit, right? And so there was some verbal warnings about perhaps a write-up coming, and then all of a sudden, the following week, Lisa comes in and makes a very inappropriate comment about those new jeans you're wearing, and you go to HR and you make a complaint, right? Well, that doesn't mean that you're not still going to get that write-up for all of those performance issues. It will mean that an investigation will occur involving Lisa, but it doesn't mean that just because you made a complaint and then got a write-up that it's retaliation, right? So I just want to make sure you understand that there is a difference between those. Thank you for playing along, QA. Supervisor's responsibility, okay? It's really important if you're a supervisor that you are held to a higher standard, right? Which means that if you see something and it's happening with folks that you oversee, that it is not okay that you do not do something about it or do not report it or make a complaint. Even if it's two staff members that are all googly-eyed over one another and they're playing touchy-feely and they feel, well, you know what, they're okay with it. They seem to like it. They like each other. It's inappropriate for the workplace. And it's not okay. And it's not okay as you as their supervisor to not stop that type of behavior and or report it if it does not stop after initially addressing it, okay? They're required to report any harassment reported to them or which they observe. They're responsible for any harassment or discrimination they should have known about, right? So there are some instances that are one-time offenses that they might never have known about. But if there's a culture of doing certain things that are inappropriate, and let's say you're a cottage manager and things are going on and people were interviewed and everybody's like, yeah, we all knew about it. They were always like that, so on and so forth. Well, you as the supervisor should have known about it as well if everybody underneath you knew about it. And so you're going to be held to that standard. And obviously we want you to model appropriate behavior as being the leader of wherever you are. Mandatory reporting, again, supervisors must report any harassment that they observe or know of, even if no one is objecting to it. Harassment must be promptly reported to the employer. Supervisors and managers will be subject to discipline as well for failing to report suspected sexual harassment. And supervisors and managers will also be subject to discipline for engaging in retaliation, right? So we said the agency. So if HR conducts an investigation, you can expect that they're not going to retaliate, or any administrators. But if your supervisor or manager, you feel like that is happening, you would want to go ahead and bring that to somebody's attention because they're not allowed to do it either. So we've hit the 90% mark of what we needed to cover in terms of making you aware of what is sexual harassment. Now, what do you do if you're harassed or you witness it? Really simply, go to HR, okay? You can go, they're gonna give you a complaint form, you can fill it out. They'll also investigate a verbal complaint, but most likely they're gonna have you come in and fill out in detail. What are they going to do as part of that investigation process? Well, they're going to do any number of things. They're going to review emails, if that makes sense to do so, video, conduct interviews, anything that will help them at their disposal to discern whether or not there was the complaint that was made had any merit. And so they're going to look for cooperation about anybody else that might be able to provide information that could lend some clarity to the situation. Any employee may be required to cooperate as needed in such an investigation. And remember that we'll keep it as confidential as we can. Human Resources will conduct immediate reviews of the allegations. They'll take any interim. So, until the conclusion of an investigation, staff might be separated from one another until they can get to the bottom of it, because we want to make sure we prevent that if there is merit to it, that there's nothing happening in the interim. Talked about those types of things, of documents that might be reviewed. And then the individual who complained and the individuals accused of sexual harassment are notified of a final determination, and that appropriate administrative action has been taken. So with all that, you feel like, okay, I made a complaint. It came back and they said there was no merit to it. Now, what do I do? Well, there's some external reporting options. You can go to the Division of Human Rights. You don't need an attorney to file. You got 1 year to do it. And there is an email address for you. We always tell people you won't remember this. So go to HR, come to training in the event you find yourself in the need of this information again, and we'll provide you with that website. There's also another external reporting option called the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. You got 300 days from the alleged discrimination. Again, you don't need an attorney to file, but you must file with the EEOC before you can file in federal court. And yet again, there is another email that you will not remember, but by all means, reach out to HR or training and we'll let you know. This just speaks of local protection. So anything above New York State, right? Maybe there's a micro law on the books in Rensselaer County. And if you feel like, you know, it wasn't covered in New York State, but you're aware of some local harassment law in Rensselaer County, then that we would look into seeing if that law exists. Harassment may constitute a crime that we talked about. So, you know, if you were to walk in and witness something that was clearly a crime, then you'd want to go ahead and report it to the police. In summary, we're almost there. Thank you for hanging on. I talked about protected characteristics early on. What are those protected characteristics in full? Age, race, creed, color, national origin, sexual orientation, military status, sex, disability, marital status, domestic violence victim status, gender identity, and criminal history. Any of those things, if somebody were to say, you can't work here, or we're going to let you go because of these things, right? You cannot be discriminated against any of those protected characteristics. And much of the information presented in this training today also refers to good old plain fashion harassment, okay? So in summary, we want to make sure you know how to recognize harassment and that it is an inappropriate behavior. Harassment because of any protected characteristics is prohibited. Why workplace harassment is also employment discrimination, and all harassment should be reported and that supervisors are held to a higher standard. Whew. Last but not least, well, almost last, in the Vanderheyden J drive, which is the drive that everybody has access to, is the complaint form. It's tagged on at the end of the sexual harassment training policy. The easiest way to get to it is to call HR. They'll give it to you. Another website, if you're really interested and you won't remember, so reach out to us and we will provide it for you if needed. Sexual harassment case studies. There's 186 case studies for us to review today. However, I'm feeling very generous. If everybody gets the answer right to the first case study that I present to you, then I will not make you listen to the other 182. All right, so Sharon transfers to a new location with her employer. Her new supervisor, Paul, is friendly and helps her get familiar with her new job duties. After a few days, when no one else is around, Paul comes over to Sharon's work area to chat. Paul talks about what he did last night, which was to go to a strip club. Sharon is shocked that Paul would bring up such a topic in the workplace and says nothing in response. Paul, however, continues talking and says that all women in the office are so unattractive that he needs to get out and see some hot chicks once in a while. He tells Sharon he is glad she joined the staff because unlike the others, she is easy on the eyes. Sharon feels very offended and demeaned that she and the other women in her workplace are being evaluated on their looks by their supervisor. Is this a case of sexual harassment? Raise your hand or blink 3 times. I saw blinking occurring. I saw hands raised. So you'd be correct. This is, or just chatter. I will take that as a confirmation that yes, this is sexual harassment. So I will spare you the other 182 case studies. Okay, so that concludes sexual harassment training. Is there any questions that anybody has before I turn it over to my wing woman?
The closer.
Huh?
I'm the closer.
The closer, I like that. All right, closer, take them home.
Okay, so lastly, we have USDA civil rights because in some of our programs, we provide food to the individuals through USDA. We have to go over this every year. However, I think this is just generally a nice reminder about making sure that we are providing equal services to all of the people that we support. So USDA civil rights training in a nutshell is reminding folks that when we're providing food to people, we can't discriminate based on these 6 protected classes. race, color, national origin, age, sex, and disability. As part of USDA, we collect racial and ethnic data to make sure that we are reaching all eligible individuals who might need access to our programs, right? So we do this through having a public notification. We have information on our website. I was also told that we post things in local areas about our programs to make sure that folks know that if they feel like they're eligible, they should reach out to us. So there's information about, program availability, rights and responsibilities, how to file a complaint, as well as the non-discrimination statement. This is the non-discrimination statement, which I will spare you and not read for you. But this is the main thing that I want you guys to take away from this. You'll see this in Justice for All poster with the Statue of Liberty on it. This needs to be posted in any of our areas where we are providing food through USDA. So in the cottages, Bessie, Reuben, down in the school, this needs to be hung up. And this is just a visual reminder that we cannot discriminate for any reason to those individuals. We also are obligated to provide other languages for our applications, information, as well as people readily available to speak in other languages for anybody who might be eligible for our programs or receive services through our programs who don't speak English as their primary language. Also, diet modifications are something that we want to be respectful of, and we want to make sure that we are having equal accommodations for the individuals, right? So for example, if somebody can't eat meat for whatever reason, we're not just offering them peanut butter and jelly for every single meal, right? There needs to be some sort of equal substitution for them in place. Unless they're super jazzed about peanut butter and jelly and that's their jam, but we want to make sure that it's an equal substitution. So also with folks with disabilities, we want to make sure that if they need any sort of accommodations or things needing to be adapted to help them to access food or eat food, that we are providing those. So they give the example of a child in school who's maybe in a wheelchair and they can't reach the serving line, right? So we have some sort of system in place so that they can access that food, and we have places where they can sit and eat that food. USDA also wants folks to know that if they feel like discrimination is happening, that they want you to reach out to them. They want you to file a complaint. So they will all be directed to them personally. You have 180 days from the alleged act of discrimination. Reports can be written, verbal, or anonymous, and they take confidentiality extremely serious. If you feel like you want to make a complaint, here is a website where you could go and get more information. Or if you want, I'll send it to you afterward, whatever you need. USDA, just like many of our other state oversight agencies, as QA is well aware, love to come in and do compliance reviews. USDA, I believe, comes in every 3 years, and they review our documentation about how we provide food, our billing. They even come down and they watch us serve food to the individuals to make sure that we are in compliance with all of their expectations. So they come through, they review our programs, and if they find anything that's considered non-compliance, right, just like any other state oversight agency, they're going to give us written notice. We have steps to try to get in compliance. They come back, they review, they resolve it, and we're good. But at the end of the day, they want to make sure that we are providing good customer service. So we want to make sure that participants are treated in the same manner. We are having same menu items and the same amounts for the individuals. All participants are included in meals, snacks, activities, etc., right? Food in particular is one of those areas that you can't use as part of your behavior management, right? You can't say because Tommy was, disruptive today, I'm not going to give him his snack. That is absolutely flat out not allowed, and would be considered discrimination. Also would be considered abuse for that matter. Participants should be treated with respect, kindness, and courtesy. So some questions to consider to help make sure that you are providing equal treatment to the individuals. Am I treating this person in the same manner as I treat others? Have I given this person the opportunity to ask questions? And have I provided this person with the information needed to make necessary decisions? And that, my friends, concludes Refresh Fest 2021. Do you guys have any questions? High five.
No, no questions.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you very much. It was a very enjoyable training, both of you.
All right. Excellent.
Yep, thank you.
Just a reminder to everybody, this covers your Refresh Fest part. You will get credit for this. However, you are still responsible for printing out those annual sign-offs, signing them. Look at you, Lisa. And you submit them to Tammy down in HR. Woo! Let Brian too.
Sammy.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
364 days.